back to this little location right here. What's up? My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In The Image Clothing Company, and this is In The Image Clothing Company Podcast. Today is the 5th of December, 2024, and we're gonna just, get into this podcast episode. First of all, I'll do a little bit of an intro of what In The Image Clothing Company is. We are called In The Image Clothing Company because we are all universally designed in the image of our living God, who is Jesus Christ. And we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ within this podcast. And within just our company in general, we allow the body to work, doing that mostly through clothing, because it's the only thing that's placed physically on our physical bodies at all times. And I'm going to adjust this, just very slightly move this camera up. If you're listening to an audio form, you probably didn't even notice, but if you're watching this, there we go. That's a little bit better of a headroom position there for the sake of the visual. Okay, so we talk about clothing, allowing it to stay centered, allowing it to fit correct, pants entirely above the hips, slightly higher in the front than the rear, and the seams on the tops of the shoulders right behind that little bone that's actually your collarbone. That just allows them to be in their natural positions, and then at the very edges is where they should be for those edge seams of the shoulders. So we allow the human body to work. We have two prerequisites: our shoelacing technique, which you can find where we have our anything actually online that you can find in the Image Clothing Company. You'll find that. Included with that is just tying your shoes evenly over toward the inside, pairing that with the second prerequisite being removing all the tags from everything that you wear in your shoes, all the way up through all of your clothing. And yeah, those are just the two things that we talk about to allow the body to have a chance to operate natural. And then we go from there and we allow the body to just do what it would do as if it had never been altered and get out of these chronic patternings that we get into. We also discuss, yes, flat things in the world when our hands have this natural rounding. We live in a modern 2024 and things are so abnormally flat that to the degree that they would never be in nature. And, flooring for our feet, our devices that we use for our hands in modern 2024, and other things as well, countertops, tables, anything that's flat. So the body likes to have natural texture to it, right? We live in nature until we put buildings together and things, but they always crumble back down to nature again, so our human bodies are natural and we live in a synthetically man-made world nowadays. So yes, okay, yeah, we'll have clothing available. I'll talk about that a little bit toward the end, but what I do want to talk about, we'll get into whatever we get into within this episode of In The Image Clothing Company Podcast, episode 16. But one thing I do want to say and touch on big time is that there's a lot of misconception in 2024, especially in the United States of America, where I currently live, about hydration. It's very common for people to be just drinking an immense amount of water. And I was one of those people last year, actually. There was a time last year where I was drinking somewhere around 2 to 3 gallons of water a day, trying to stay hydrated, which doesn't make sense. And I'm going to get into this. I want to try to keep all and every opinion out of this that I possibly can, because that's what we try to do here at In The Image Clothing Company in every aspect of anything, whether it's talking about the gospel or talking about the human body and its natural workings. We try to just come at everything and see everything as it is. But we are equal sinful humans, and we mess up in our deliveries. We misunderstand things at times, and that can happen. But within this, I really want to just talk about things as they are. So, what water really does for the body, really, the main thing that it does is just lubricate the body, right? Our blood has to pump through our body, through our circulatory system, our bloodstream. I've mentioned I've got pretty good experience, if you will, personal experience with the heart, because I have had 6 total heart surgeries, 2 full open heart surgeries, and then 4 other smaller, if you will, heart surgeries. So I've had some experience with the circulatory system of the body. And really, all water does is lubricate the body. It lubricates the blood. It lubricates mucus within parts of the body. There's mucus around the trachea in our throat. There's mucus in our nose and on our brain. Places in the body to lubricate. There's mucus, and whatever else it could be. Just allowing things to flow well, is what water does within the body. But water, like the compound makeup, or whatever the technical term, analogy to say that is, of water, is H2O. It's 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. So within water, there's actually no nutrients that the human body is extracting. So I've heard many times people will say, sometimes you're confusing your hunger with thirst, and water will satisfy your hunger. And really, it can't in any kind of way that could fulfill your body with nutrients, because there's nothing within water that your body can actually extract. It just uses water as a tool to lubricate. You know, your saliva is mostly water, and it'd be just about impossible to swallow anything as far as food goes without coating it with saliva. So water is just a tool that aids the body in what it does. A notification popped up on my phone. That's why I tilted my head like that. But I'm using my phone to film this episode of the podcast. So, anyway. When I was, I like to, as much and in every case that I can, I like to speak out of personal experience. And so, yes, last year, like I said, I was drinking just an immense amount of water. And what water does is actually potentially just flush out your system, because the human body will hold on to the amount of water that it needs. And if there's excess water that's placed into the body that it doesn't need, it'll just urinate it out. It'll just get rid of it. If the body has too much of something, it will come out of it, if there's a way for that to happen. But when it comes to food and water, that's how it works. So within the body, there are electrolytes. And some people might know quite well what electrolytes are. Some people might have just heard about it. But really, electrolytes are things like magnesium and potassium and sodium. Sodium is salt, right? I think there's different forms of sodium, and there's also quite a few different kinds of magnesium. But these things are things that the body uses to hold on to water, and it uses these things as well to do things like brain function. Magnesium is something that plays a lot of roles within the function of the brain. The human body's brain is just an electrical system. That's all it is. And so when we have the human body, I always say, just only working the way it does, right? I always mention how we cannot tell our bodies what to do, and they just have to be in the position to do what they are going to do, and they just have to be allowed to do things like breathe the way they're going to. They have to be able to do things like digest the way they're going to, and stand and walk and sleep and sit. And that's why you see me sitting on the ground rather than in these 90-degree seat heights that are so common to sit in nowadays, but so unnatural for the only way the human body actually works, right? I've talked about that many times within In the Image Clothing Company videos. But meaning, in addition, the body will just regulate fluids by itself, right? The body does so much by itself because we don't tell it to breathe, and we don't remind it to blink. We don't tell it to pump the heart as often as it does and speed it up when the body can use more blood to circulate when we're using more exertion and energy, right? We don't tell our bodies to do those things because we can't. And the body will regulate the amount of fluid that it needs by itself. It has a whole system within it that does that. So what actually happens with just plain water is, if you're drinking an excess amount of plain water, more than your body needs, you're going to flush out necessary things within your body, and your body's going to get used to urinating more often and releasing what's in it more often than it would naturally do because of the excess amount of water you're placing into it. And so then that natural balance that it has and that it does on its own of the electrolytes within its system will get changed to where you will have less electrolytes within your system naturally because of the excess amount of water that's within there. And it'll just throw off the balance on whatever end it could be, whether you have too little of water or too much. the electrolyte balance will not be able to be regulated if the body can't keep itself at a pretty like general normal, if you will. And that's why it's very good to be in touch with our bodies, to know what our bodies actually need and what their own individual, from person to person, normal is as far as amounts of things. Different people need different amounts of things, different sizes of bodies, different fat versus muscle content within human bodies. Things like that will require different amounts of food or water. But here's the thing is, if we, well, let me clarify with that. So I'm not judging anybody for weight or size or anything, but what I mean is just that you take like an infant baby, and they could only, just because of the physical size of their body, they could only hold a certain amount of water compared to somebody who's like 6'5" and, a couple 100 pounds, 300, 400 pound, person. I just mean physically like that. The amount of water or food that we need to maintain the functionality of the size of body that we have is nothing to do with, any kind of shame about shape or size of body, okay? And that's very apparent. If you know In The Image Clothing Company at all, we do not talk that way about shaming people for sizes of anything, because we always say it's only about the skeletal system's natural position when it comes to functionality in a physical sense. But when we're talking about the digestive system, that's an internal thing that's different to talk about, rather than the physical functioning of the body, like moving through its environment. Okay, so yeah, when we have such an excess amount of water being, intaked, being taken in, then our natural balance of our internals, our bodies aren't able to naturally regulate their balance. That's what I'm trying to say, of the nutrients and minerals that are within it. Because you can't function with too much water. Just like being dehydrated is not quite ideal, having too much water is just as much of a problem, but it's just on the other end. Having too little of water will throw off the balance, but then having too much does the same thing. So here's what I want to say. Things like what I was discussing, sodium, magnesium, whatever it comes down to, when any electrolyte that, or any mineral within the body at all. I mean, I'm not like, I don't know, like I haven't been to school for the functionality of the innards of the body like that, but anything that's going to regulate the body's hydration, if it's out of balance, then it's just not going to be working correct. Here's the thing. When we think about fruit, okay, fruit's the big one. Fruit, just about all fruit that we think about that's pretty watery to our, like we can look at it and it's obviously pretty watery. An apple, an orange, especially melons, very obvious that there's a lot of water in melons. Even bananas, though. A banana, you don't squeeze it and have a lot of water come out of it quite the same as if you were to squeeze like an orange. But these fruits, just about universal between those fruits, is somewhere right around 80% water. Somewhere between maybe 75% and 85% between each of those fruits that I mentioned, actually. And I know that because I actually looked it up about a couple hours ago. Those, just the common fruits that are pretty obviously watery. But then there's things like watermelon that's even higher percentage than that. And the point is, water by itself, plain water, really is more of like a supplemental thing. As far as, we should be getting pretty much the amount of water that we need through what we're eating. I looked up on the internet, I didn't know this until a couple hours ago, but I've been thinking about this for quite a while because, well, I'm going to say what I'm saying and then I'll explain it a little bit, because cow's milk is 87% water, okay? So if you were to take a glass and you filled that glass 87% of the way full, right? If you're watching this in visual, I'll give you a visual. If you're listening to this, you can just kind of envision a glass. Let's say you have an 8-ounce glass and you fill it, somewhere around 7 ounces full to the top with water. That last ounce, give or take, would be whatever else is within the milk, cow's milk. So it's as if you're drinking 87% of the volume within the cup or glass or container that you're using to pour your milk, and that 87% is just water. So there'd be no need to have water in addition unless the amount within that isn't enough for your body to regulate its system naturally. It's something that I've been talking with people about for months this year, because out of personal experience, out of transparency, out of entirely, I'm not trying to make this something that it isn't, this is the truth. I have not had water or even something like lemonade that just has a little bit of something within the water for 2 months, maybe. The last time that I had plain water was, I can almost guarantee, at least 2 months ago. And what I drink is whole milk. Whole cow's milk is actually what I have been drinking. And then besides that, I just eat my food, but I eat correct, meaning just I chew very thoroughly, allow my saliva to mix with everything very well, and then I swallow it. Without swallowing air, ideally, because we don't want to introduce air into the digestive system, because that will alter the way that it naturally works. But, people have been telling me, and I was one of those people that just had such a misconception, that I needed more water, and I need to drink plain water and things. Yet, during the warmer months, I told you the date, but a few months back it was warmer, I'd be going on 12-mile walks just about every single day on this. There's this trail nearby where I live, and I was going on 12-mile walks almost every single day. And in those times, I wasn't drinking any water either. But I never felt dehydrated, like at all in those times. Or now, but I just mean that's, quite a bit of walking. And in our modern 2024, especially in the United States of America, it's very common for people to be just drinking so much, too much water, just a very, very excessive amount. And I was one of those people in my past. But we need to allow the body to be in a position to work. Because if your body's out of its position, I've talked about this within stuff that I've made for In The Image Clothing Company. I'm just not sure exactly which video to be able to reference right now. That's not really important, other than I've talked about this within this community already. When the body's out of its natural position and being altered by something, everything's going to feel off. The body only works as a whole, and if something's being altered within it, it's going to feel like something needs to be changed or fixed, and a lot of times that will send us to things that we go to out of our patternings to fix something, whether it's food or water, these things that we use to comfort ourselves really is what it becomes. And so people are living within such imbalanced clothing, shoelaces tied and laced all incorrect, just altering their bodies so much to where they can't even breathe normal. And in those times, then they'll be grasping for things to try to get their body to feel soothed and work better. And water is one of those things that becomes people's, myself included in the past, security blanket. I wouldn't go anywhere without a water bottle for years, but I would almost never drink it. It just was something that made me feel as though I had some control over the way my body worked, because I wasn't allowing, keyword always at In The Image Clothing Company, allow. I wasn't allowing my body to just work. So yeah, I don't feel thirsty. Not that I couldn't ever feel thirsty, but not in the way that was common for me to feel in the past, where I felt that I needed to drink an entire glass of water. To me now, that's such an absurd thing to think about, because I actually avoid, let's just get really personal experience-y with this. I want that to be kind of silly, because the people that I live with currently, they made spaghetti a couple nights ago, and they offered me some, and that's very kind. But there was a part of me that it was hesitant to actually eat the spaghetti at all because there's so much water within pasta. And this is what I was saying about the content within milk. Milk's 87% water, right? Again, you have a glass, you fill that glass 87% of the way to the top with just water, and now filling it from that point 87% of the way full to the top. That's all that's in milk besides water. Just that last, 13% at the top is stuff that is not water. Everything else is just water. And pasta is a very similar thing, to where when you think about, if you've ever made pasta, the noodles, the size of the noodle, when it's dry, normally you purchase noodles dry, and the way that you make pasta is by putting in 6 or 8 full cups of water. So any expansion to the size of the pasta is just water. That's a lot of water. It's as if you're drinking the amount of water you've placed in there, plus if you were to just eat the noodles dry, right? And so just to see the amount of water that's within the pasta, except for what's evaporated out as it's been cooked. But it's things like that where we actually are intaking so much water through what we eat. And we really need to allow the body to be able to regulate itself. We have to eat correct, the way that I was describing a minute ago, because the body just has to work the only way that it does. If you've seen any In the Image Clothing Company videos, like apart from the podcast, then that sounds very familiar. I've said that phrase so many times. We just have to allow the body to do the only thing that it actually does. And that goes for every function: breathing, eating, eating as far as digestion, respiratory system, the musculature system of the body, which really all that is just the skeletal system, because all the muscles do is pivot and hinge and move and rotate the skeletal system. So if it's in its position, then the muscles will just do their thing. And then, as we talk about, there's no need to ever stretch in that case, unless something absurd happens that's very, very unique situation. And really, it's more things like you get your arm put in a cast because you broke it, and now that it's been fixed into a position, you have to stretch back into your full range of motion. But the body's been given ranges of motion. It would just have them unless or until, and ideally neither of those, but unless or until altered. It would just do what it's designed to do. Same with eating, same with breathing, and we'll get into things if we do down the road, but hydration is a big thing that is such a misconception. And, I'm speaking out of experience, and I'm speaking out of being the person who was so misunderstanding of it, as well in the past. So it's really cool because, people are sweating so much, and people don't feel better after they drink all this water. I mean, I didn't in the past either. I mean, it kind of like felt refreshing in a way. You come in from outside and you like drink this big old glass of something, and it seems refreshing like in the instant you're drinking it, but then like you don't actually feel better from it because your body doesn't actually need that much of that. It really doesn't. It's, in fact, like I'm saying, it's damaging, because then you're potentially just flushing out your electrolytes. If it's just plain water, there's nothing to replace them. That's the whole thing. There's nothing that water is giving to your body. There isn't. It only lubricates your body. So it's different, because drinking the milk, there's things within there that the body can extract, and then the water it can use in the way that it's going to use the water within the milk that's naturally there. So it's strange, like within a fruit, I mean, there's natural electrolytes within fruits. In bananas, there's a lot of potassium, and that's something that if you were to take an electrolyte supplement, that's what's going to be in there, almost guaranteed for every one, is potassium as one of the ingredients. Some people might even just take pure potassium because normally when you do take electrolyte supplements, there's multiple different electrolytes within one, but some people might be just taking potassium alone to try to aid their body in having that mineral. But these things are just natural minerals. these supplementations we're taking to try to stay hydrated. Because if you were to take, I'm going to address this real quick. I was planning to make this video. I've been planning for months and months to make this video, like 4 or 5 months, I feel, around. But I'm very glad that it's a podcast episode rather than like an In the Image Clothing Company video, because there's no visual necessarily that I'm showing here. And so it'll live on in podcast form where it's kind of like meant to be. So that's something I just felt that I wanted to share. But because this is a gift to have this knowledge and to be able to document it like this, that's, you know, a place that we can come back to. In the Image Clothing Company podcast is just a gift in itself to me personally. So, and anybody who watches it, because ideally, you know, you can get things from this. That's why we have it, is to speak to the best of our sinful abilities truth, right? So sinful abilities meaning just we're naturally human beings who mess up. Okay, but yes, when we think about sodium, for example, which is an electrolyte, right? Sodium is table salt, right? Sodium is something that's just natural. Within the ocean, there's salt. If you have seen around here, it's very common to have, it's called Himalayan pink salt. I think it's from the Himalayan mountains, I'm pretty sure. Mountains, I'm pretty sure that's where they get it. It's naturally pink. Sometimes it's more gray or opaque, but we'll have like salt lamps. There's actually one right here. I think it's plugged in, so I'm not going to grab it, and I don't want to move the camera for the sake of we'll leave it in the same position for the whole podcast. But, you know, we'll have these salt lamps that are common for people to buy where it's just a chunk of salt. It can be a few inches big or, you know, very big, any size that they can mine, and then they'll put a light bulb inside of it so that it like glows through and illuminates the area around you. That's Himalayan pink salt. That's the stuff that we would purchase in the grocery store, ground up in a little shaker to put on our food. The reason I'm saying that is because all it is a mineral. All it is just a natural thing from the earth. Just like potassium. Like I'm saying, all it is just something that you'll find in many fruits and whatever else it could be in. I just don't know all of what it's in right now. So I know for sure that there's potassium in bananas, you know? So the only reason we're supplementing things is because our bodies are not being allowed to extract nutrients from things because we're not introducing stuff to the body the way that it's naturally going to ingest things, and or it's just being preached and pushed in the media in modern 2024, you know, because there's companies that make hydrating drinks, and they might be hydrating you more than if you were to, the point definitely is, oh yes, way more than if you were to drink water, because water actually, heard correct, and in a way, dehydrates you, like I'm saying, because it'll flush the electrolytes out. But a lot of it really is, I've talked about how running is a culture. Running is very damaging to the body for the sake of exercise. On these long distance runs that people go on, it's so damaging to the body. I mean, you hear all the time running injuries. So much of that is to do with shoelacing and clothing fit and material and position. And there's no opinion to that. I mean, we discuss that kind of stuff to the point where you just have to see it. It's just, I mean, that's what's happening. But at the same time, it's still, I've talked so often about running so damaging to the body just for the sake of extended length, endurance, cardio, workout type runs. That's something that I've mentioned again and again that I will stand on till the day that I die. But, you know, short distances to catch something or to get away from something. But being pushed so much in modern 2024, or at least in this culture where I currently am living, it's very common to see when people do run, they're putting their body through so much. And again, if it's not even anywhere near a natural position to begin with, then they're going to feel like they're craving something to like fix their body and to like have it be able to possibly work when they're just doing stuff to it out of their own doing. Maybe they don't know, and that's, you know, you can't be held accountable for things you don't know, but then they're just drinking so much liquid and their body's just so dysregulated. It's really the reason why they feel like they have to have all that. And so that's why it's so common for these electrolyte drinks to be sold and purchased so widespread and popular. And really, they're not something that we need except for very, very specific cases. I mean, if you've been out there and, you got stranded somewhere and you got, quite dehydrated, you can come in, they can stick an IV needle into your body and, fill your body with some hydrating things like that, replenish the electrolytes that have been just depleted because your body has just used them in the way that it does, being out there without having food with electrolyte rich stuff in it to replenish it. There's times and places. I always say times and places for everything, or otherwise there wouldn't be that thing, whatever the thing could possibly be. There's always a time and a place for everything, even the things that we wouldn't really want to have if we had a say, right? But yeah, people are just very imbalanced within their bodies. I mean, physically, yes. If we're coming from an indie image clothing company standpoint, that's very obvious. That's what we talk about, is staying centered, right? Physically, with, the sternum, the spine, and the nose being the center of our bodies. Those are the three things I always mention. But within the regulation of internal things like fluids and minerals, people are very imbalanced just because of the position, really, that their body is in. Because of kind of what I was discussing there and things that things that we talk about at In The Image Clothing Company. So yeah, it's really cool though to see. I mean, because if you think about in the past, people wouldn't be drinking so much water like they do here in modern 2024 United States of America. And it's not just because it wasn't as easy to get, because in most places, I understand that there's a lot of difference within places, even within like a first world country, if you will, like we are here at in the United States of America. But in most places in the United States of America, we have such an easy access to water, to the point, I mean, we have indoor plumbing in most buildings, and everybody just has such an easy access to that. So if people are thirsty or feel that they could need something, like I was saying, mistaking hunger for thirst, which is actually further depleting their body from nutrients and the things I'm discussing, then they'll go to water, which is so damaging, actually. But in the past, when people didn't have as easy of an access, or just in parts of the world where they don't have the way that we do here, indoor plumbing, or at least as commonly, and things, they don't drink as much water, but their body, in most cases, I can't speak for everything, right? But most cases, their bodies are able to regulate their own internal workings easier than around here because of that reason. Because if your body has to regulate itself and hold on to water until you can get access to it again, then it'll get like, I mean, that's just how it would naturally work, but in a sense, get like trained to doing that. But if we live in a place where there's just so much water, the body's just not able to predict what's going to happen, because sometimes you're just downing water, and then sometimes maybe you're not drinking very much, and then, things like that. So we just have to allow the body to do its thing. I know that gets heard so much. If you have heard In The Image Clothing Company, that's what we talk about. That's what it is. Because even within this, I'm not telling you to do anything to stay hydrated. I'm just saying the body will do what it does, and we have to let it. And we just gotta do all that we can to understand how our own personal bodies do that. And they all do it so very similar, even though we are slightly different, right? We're all universally designed, as I discussed. So, yeah. I just think that's so cool to see, because I almost avoid things that are full of so much water, as far as like just plain water, like sometimes soups and, like I mentioned, pasta, things like that your body doesn't need just plain water if it already has enough. It can't do anything with it besides urinate and get rid of it. So, yeah. Anyway, I think it's cool because there's been people around me. I mean, I got nothing against them for not knowing, and it's not like I'm upset about it. But I just, that's what I'm saying is it's really cool to just know, because a lot of people don't, and I was one of those people, right? But there's a lot of people around me talking about how water is so important, and when you go out, make sure you take this amount of water and stay hydrated, but by drinking plain water. And it's just a misconception, right? You don't know what you don't know. I didn't know what I didn't know until I really got to where I am now, and then I'm just going to continue to learn more. So it's cool, man. And that's the other thing as well, is a lot of our food is so unnatural, to the point that there's like not very much, I mean, there's not even very much water in a lot of our modern food, because of what it is, as far as it's unnatural and different than it ever was in the past. And so the way that it's made and the ingredients that are in it and like added to it that are unnatural, the water content within a lot of these things is just barely even there. And it would just naturally be there. I mean, because if you just think about, again, when I say natural, like when I talk about the body and I say natural is the only way that it works, it's not like there's a choice to be either natural or be something else. Natural is all that there is. And so until we make things that are unnatural. And so when you think about just in nature, right, again, just what there is, that's all that will remain. That was there before us and will be there after us, human beings. Anything natural is going to have quite a bit of water in it. I mean, sure, there's like wheat and grain that's pretty dry, even nuts are pretty dry, but any kind of fruit, any kind of vegetables as well, you think about cucumbers or zucchinis, or, I mean, there's many vegetables that are such a high content of water, mostly water, like around 80-90% of the whole thing is just water, right? So I'm going to mention as well, I'm vegetarian, and so I don't eat meat. It's been, since, a couple months into 2024. I don't know if it was February or March, but one of those two, since I stopped eating meat. So that's different as well, because meat just is an entirely different thing. The way that the body tries to process meat, just because it's entirely different. I mean, you think about animals, and they're labeled an entirely different thing. There's a carnivore, and then there's an herbivore, and then there's an omnivore, which is what human beings are, that eats both. But carnivore is meat, animals that pretty much just only eat meat, and then herbivores, animals that pretty much only eat plants, fruits, vegetables, things like that, or nuts and seeds, grains. But then in the center, there's, things and animals, human beings, right, that eat both. But I'm entirely vegetarian, and so I do definitely have a different view on food than people who also eat meat. I know that from experience, right? Because I used to eat meat until the time that I said. So, yeah, I mean, but the point really is that there's a lot of water content within the things that we do consume, and it just needs to be, because your body, it can't do its function without everything being lubricated well, but at the same time, just having plain water, the body doesn't have anything to like hold on to, in a sense, within that. You know what I mean? It's just going to go straight through you, because there's nothing the body will be able to do with it besides that, if it already has the amount that it needs. So yeah, man, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's, I'm just trying to debate if, how much deeper we go into this, is for the sake of this podcast episode, because I don't need to be redundant, and I don't know really how much more I could say that would like, add to the knowledge that you could get from what I have said up until this point. So maybe that is what I say for now. So yeah, I mean, in the past though, it was different, because people were more in touch with their bodies. And so they knew what their body was lacking or needing, even without all the modern supplementation. And I think it's very common for people to think that we're so much more like ahead or advanced because we have things, at least in access, in ways they didn't have in the past, as far as like they didn't really have supplementation like pills and drops quite the same, at least, right, in the past as we do now. But that doesn't mean that we're better off in those ways. It really doesn't. In fact, we're very, very, very much more out of touch than pretty much any time period you could ever choose from in the past because of how unnatural modern 2024 is. So anyway, yeah, that's hydration. And the reason I said that this is going to be a cool little thing to be able to come back to as far as being a podcast episode is because I talk about hydration. I already have quite a few times within In The Image Clothing Company content. And this way I have, full kind of like explanation and discussion on, a little bit of like basis of hydration within the body, ideally keeping all my opinions out of it. So, because that's the thing is people will tell you what you should or shouldn't do as far as hydration, but it's mostly opinion, and a lot of times it's because they're selling something to hydrate you, which it may not actually be doing a very good job at anyway. So anyway, yeah, that's what I'll say. Because I'm looking at these bananas. Actually, over in the kitchen over here, there's bananas, and I'm just kind of looking at them. I'm wondering if there's anything else I need to say about them specific. Because I just don't want to, I don't want to beat the point. I don't want it to be like trying to say more than I need to about it. So, yeah. It's shocking, though. It is, especially the immense contrast from drinking the amount that I said of water that I was drinking last year to now seriously, like, not drinking plain water at all. I don't feel thirsty anymore. I mean, it's so cool because, that's the whole thing. That's what In The Image Clothing Company is. That's why we are what we are. We're not trying to sell anything. Up until today's date, we don't have anything for sale. I'll talk about the clothing that we'll have, but it's really just about sharing truth and allowing people's bodies to work. So that's why it's so cool, is because it's not only about the hydration itself, as far as if I were to stop drinking water the way that I did and just drink, like I'm saying, pretty much primarily milk as far as my source of water apart from food. Like if you're thinking about something to drink, if I were to just have done that without allowing my body to get centered and, allowing my core to be in a position to stay activated as it naturally would, and allowing just my body to work through clothing and the things that we do talk about in the Image Clothing Company, then it couldn't have had quite the same effect, because it really is more of a physical body's position that causes these imbalances and cravings that we have, more than just about anything else that you could possibly attribute it to. And if that seems far-fetched, well, stick around if you'd like for In The Image Clothing Company for information that we do have, stuff that we already have available. You can go see. We have an episode of the podcast titled Far-Fetched But True, because we do speak on things that seem foreign and a little bit backward to the world and to the modern 2024 teachings. But again, out of our sinful natures, we're really trying to just speak on truth, and that's it, because there's no point for us to try to broad spread opinions. So that's why it's so great to be able to speak out of experience if and when I can, when this is one of those cases, right? Because we're here to change lives. We're here to actually legitimately change lives, to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ, to help people without having to be physically in person with each and every one of them. That's why it's so beautiful to be able to do this through a podcast or through videos. And that's what it's about. Yes, we are a clothing company, and we will have clothing available. always made out of 100% natural materials, staying centered, fitting where I discussed clothing has to fit, regardless of how tall or short or fat or skinny or musculature or slender or man or woman you are. That's where clothing has to sit, and that's where ours will, at least the intention behind our designs. We can't necessarily guarantee how it's going to fit on every single human that puts it on, but that's the whole reason we're making clothing, right? Is to allow the body to work. So we do that. If you'd like to check out In The Image Clothing Company videos, where we have a lot of things to offer, really, because I've been the one that's made all the videos up until this point, and I discuss the anatomy of the human body, the natural positionings of things, and just how clothing is affecting those. And even like I was discussing, things within the world that aren't necessarily just physical clothing items, but just allowing our bodies to be able to go through this modern, unnatural 2024 in a way that's natural for them. That's what we do. So yeah, you can check that out if you'd like to. We also have now In The Image Clothing Company music. And up until now, what it's been is me doing freestyles over other people's beats, you know, keeping it around gospel messages and topics, and it's been really fun. So wherever that goes, that'll keep doing its thing, and check that out if you'd like to. And yeah, thank you for listening to episode 16 of In The Image Clothing Company podcast on hydration. Yeah, see ya. Thank you.